I just wanted to play video games.
So, we got to talk about Supergirl. So we had yet another superhero movie come and bomb. And this has been probably the most predictable failure. But let's get into it. So, okay. Why did Supergirl fail? By all accounts, I mean, there's a lot of material there to make it a success, but unfortunately, the state of the film industry is in such a position that these kinds of box office flops, they're not surprising at all. They're completely predictable. So they hyped it to high heaven, and they really wanted people to show up, and especially women, which they were trying to market it at. And once again, women did not turn out for the film. And even though the movie failed in the box office big time, it was still a majority of men of those that did go see it. So what happened? Like, how did we get to this point? And then I want to make a comparison to another movie that I think is interesting and shows, like, that there is definitely a market that exists for an action film that involves revenge, for, let's say, evil trafficking brigand types. So, why did Supergirl fail? Now, people will say this is superhero fatigue. I don't agree with that. I don't think that that's the issue. I think that that's and the reasons there's a number of reasons for it. For one, there are plenty of superhero properties that still do well. Like Invincible is still, people watch it on Amazon. The Boys, even though I stopped watching it after the first season, which I wasn't really enjoying anyway, it has an audience. There are people that will turn out to watch that kind of stuff. So it's not because that is the issue. The issue is, I think, a couple of different things. One is breaking too much from canon. You're using an existing property in order to attract the audience that supports and understands that property. I mean, He-Man is doing pretty well as well, right? Not exactly a superhero movie, but definitely, let's say, adjacent to it. A superhero adjacent. It's kind of pulpy, that kind of stuff. But so the problem is that there were some changes to, the character and the setting, and James Gunn is not generally a good fit for that. Now, he's done well with Guardians of the Galaxy, and, people will always bring that up, but the truth is that that's a very specific style of character, a specific style of film. And the other thing, too, about superhero movies that I don't know if people understand, or superhero stories, superhero is not a genre, it's just the aesthetic. The genre can be any genre. Like, you can have a thriller, you can have psychological horror, you could have action, you could have, like a space opera. You can do any number of different genres of film and give it a superhero coat of paint, and it'll work, right? Like a good Batman story, for example, is really more like a detective story. It's more like a noir story, and there could be action in it, but I think that if people watched a Batman movie and all he was doing was blowing things up and fighting guys from start to finish, and not, being a detective, doing the crime thing, that kind of thing, people are going to respond poorly. They're going to say, well, that doesn't feel like Batman, because he's not just that one thing, right? And so this is as an aside, like, it bothers me that people treat the superhero movie genre or superhero genre itself as a genre, and it's not. It is sort of like an umbrella for, it's not even that. It's just an aesthetic. It's just like a look. You can take the same stories and set them in the medieval times. You could set them during the Renaissance. You could set them in ancient Rome. You could set them on a distant planet in a science fiction setting, and you can have the same elements, the same kinds of characters, the same kinds of villains, The only thing that changes that is that you have, like, you know, with superhero stories, you usually have characters that have different powers or something like that, different skills, different things they bring to the table. But again, you can do that in any type of movie. I mean, look at Ocean's 11, I think it's called, where you have all these different guys and they're basically like, you know, pulling off a massive heist. And they get the crew together, and everyone in the crew brings something different to the table. It's like they have a unique individual trait or characteristic that they use that will come in handy. And this is the kind of stuff people like to see, especially men, I think. They like to see a plan come together with different people that have different personalities maybe, and that causes a little bit of tension, but they all come together at the end and they sort of pull it off, right? Like A-Team kind of thing. But anyway, so that was a long aside, but superhero movies are not a genre of film. They're just like an aesthetic. So you have the and that's part of the problem too, is that people who make these movies, they're expecting, like, they have like a thing in their head where it's like, well, what is in a superhero movie? Oh, right, there's a hero, there's an origin story, there are supporting characters, there's a villain, and there are stakes, and the stakes are usually, you know, the world or the galaxy or the universe or something like that. And that's true, but that's too simple. There's not enough depth there. There's not enough to dig into. And I think this is the problem with Supergirl and a lot of these failure movies of the past, because they only see it in terms of those very simple elements, which are not enough to, like, I mean, you need those things for any story, right? So you get like, you have this problem where people don't know that superhero stories are basically any story, you know, and they're going in trying to treat it like it's his own genre. And then on top of that, you have this agenda, and these people will not change this. This is not going to go away, okay? They have this idea in their head that representation is the ultimate good. It's like and in their way, I think in their own way, they think it's the only thing of value they can bring to a film that they otherwise would not care about. Like they have no interest in the properties because they didn't grow up with it, they didn't really get into it or whatever. They might tell you they did, but they didn't. Like, they're always lying about what it is that they like because they want you to go see it and they want you to think that they're with you, that they're one of your people, that they get, you know, what the property is. So they're going to inject this stuff, and they also can't help it because they want to signal to their peers and their base that they are like the good people who believe the good things, and that anyone who disagrees with that must be the bad people that believe the bad things. So you get this, you have this Millie Alcock who was cast in the role, and look, I don't think that she is the reason this movie failed. I think it's purely on the writers, directors, you know, and the people that were involved in the production. So just like, and I've said this many times, I said this about Rachel Zegler. I mean, yes, she put her foot in her mouth a few times, but she ultimately was the strongest thing about the Snow White movie because she is a good singer and she was able to pull it off. But I don't blame her for the movie being a failure. I almost don't blame her for her opinions because, again, a lot of these people they have NPC talking points. They just get it from the people around them, from the media, you know, and from the people who are gassing them up all the time. So they're just gonna like carry those opinions forward. I don't have any bad blood towards Rachel Zegler. I don't have any hate for Millie Alcock, not even Brie Larson. I really don't. Daisy Ridley. I think they're just, you know, women that were put into a role and they thought that it was deserved and all that, and it's ignorant and it's silly, but it's true. Like, they're basically just, it's like dealing with a child, you know? So in some of the Millie Alcock interviews, where the media, and these are the people who I think are really responsible, because the media, the legacy media, they're always trying to create like drama between the performers, the actors, and the people behind the films and the audience or the potential audience. So they're always trying to like stir the pot there, and I don't know why no one in Hollywood, or very few people in Hollywood, call them out for that, because it's like, look, you're trying to create division. I just want people to go, and hopefully they'll enjoy the movie, and that'll be it. But they'll be like, well, how queer do you think this movie is? Well, what do you think the MAGAs are gonna think? What do you think about the MAGA Republicans' beliefs on this? And they just like constantly try to like, you know, create this it's like artificial combativeness, right? Or somewhat. So, you know, Millie Alcock was doing the rounds, and she was basically asked like, oh, you know, is Supergirl queer? You know, or something to that degree. And it was basically, it was Pride Month at the time, which, you know, I didn't notice because it wasn't thrown in my face this year. Thank you, Trump. But she felt like they were like, well, it's Pride Month. We have to bring that up as often as possible. And this is another thing they do, is they bring it up to the actors when they're on the spot, like on the red carpet or going to something. And I think that there's also like a risk there, like for the actor. Like, let's say you're somebody who, you know, is kind of indifferent towards like Pride, like you don't care about it that much, or you might even be opposed to it on some level. But if you're like working in the business and you want to keep working in the business, you kind of have to toe the line, right? Because otherwise they're not going to let you get work anymore. And I don't know what Millie Alcock's beliefs are. She's probably like on board with all this, but let's say that she wasn't completely. It wouldn't change the fact that she would have to say something in support of it, because she's there in public with a microphone in her face, and they're telling her, like, you know, in so many words, support trans kids, or whatever it is the issue of the day might be. Support the current thing. Do you support the current thing? And she's got to say, yes, I support the current thing, and then she can keep getting work, right? And, you know, I have sympathy for the idea that we have to work in order to, like, you know, live, so I can't hate her for that. But that doesn't change the fact that it was a big turnoff for a lot of people when she basically implied that Supergirl might be gay or something, right? And this is also, when you take into context, the broader context of how this has been done everywhere. Like, they were like, you know, you remember when The Acolyte was coming out and they were interviewing Leslie Headland, former assistant to Harvey Weinstein, and they were asking her, you know, well, what do you think about, like, you know, C-3PO and R2-D2? Are they a gay couple, right? And of course, you know, she goes along with it, right? So like, and when people see that, where like everything is being made into being gay, like Frodo and Sam, they're gay for each other. You know, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they're gay for each other. They've been pushing this stuff for a long, long time, and people are getting sick of it. People are getting sick of it because not everything is about sex, which, you know, speaks to what these people are always thinking about. And also, not everything has to be gay. Like, not like, sometimes there are just, you know, friends. Like, there are men who are friends with men and there's nothing gay. There are women who are friends with women and there's nothing gay, right? There are men who are friends with women and there's nothing sexual going on. This is just what it is. Men could be friends with gay men and have nothing happening, right? But the media needs to keep pushing this stuff. So, because the audience has seen this so many times, where this sort of trope gets brought up, like, are they gay? Then they're going to get sick of it, and they're going to be like, well, I'm not going to watch this. I'm not going to tune in for this thing. And so, you know, the big budget DC superhero movie crashed. Part of it is because, again, Millie Alcock had those comments. And of course, she looked like, you know, just like scummy and like dirty, and she didn't look cute. I think at the end of Superman, and I thought it was a different actress, to be honest, but I guess it's not. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not sure, but she makes a cameo appearance in that, and there's something cute and wholesome about her, even though she was like a drunk party girl even then. But you felt like there was something more aspirational, and at the very least, maybe they were just trying to do something different with Supergirl, so she wasn't too similar to Superman. I mean, I never cared for these kind of like legacy character types, you know. So we have this Supergirl movie. They don't like the way that she's presented. Of course, Millie Alcock defended that. She's like, "Oh, girls can be messy. Like, look at this. Look at me. I'm vomiting and I'm peeing," you know. And it's just weird. Like, nobody wants to see that. And I get the feeling that it's like intended to be not just disenchanting, but almost like a tearing down of the aspirational. Like, we like stories about heroes because they feel like they're greater people than us. It's like in religion, in Christianity, one of the things that we look to are the people who have best sort of like, struggled to get closer to Christ. And the ones that get the furthest, we call them the saints, right? Now, the saints are not gods. We don't worship them. That's not that we don't idolize them. We still put God at the top. He still comes first. But the saints are like examples. They're like the examples of how to be like the best version of yourself, right? And you can read about the lives of the saints, and they're all very aspirational. I don't know, like, I don't know what Saint Ambrose of Milan, or I believe he's been recently canonized as a saint, Father Seraphim Rose. Like, I don't know, like, what their bowel movements look like, or if they've ever vomited. I'm sure they have, like, they're human beings, but, like, that's not important, right? It's about, like, where do you put your attention? And the Supergirl movie, having her act this way, and showing that, like, making that a big part of it. I mean, they could have just had an off-screen shot, shot of her place, and you hear the toilet flush, and she comes into the room, and that still would have been, like, a bit much, but no, I guess that there's just shots of her, like, peeing, and it makes me wonder, like, whoa, who are the perverts that are making this movie? But it was written by a woman, and it was a feminist woman, and feminism is all about killing the male gaze, and they would call it normalizing, like, let's say, all of the flaws and ugliness of womanhood, but they're just showing you the ugliness. And I think it's mainly because they don't like the idea that men enjoy it. Like that, like they don't enjoy the ugliness, but that they enjoy, a content that has women in it who happen to be attractive, or if it doesn't have women in it, they have a problem with that too, right? I mean, so anyway, so the trailers, they got a lot of, mixed reactions. I think highly negative, and you can see that by the numbers. She made, comments in some press tour statements where she dismissed Christian dads, burner accounts, or implying the film doesn't need a male audience. These are like just generally bad takes. I mean, even though the movie flopped hard, it was still majority men that went to watch it, of the ones that did, which I have to say, guys, why are you supporting content by people who hate you? Like, just don't, make sure that they don't make any money. Like, we still have men who will go watch this. They went and saw the Marvels. It was still majority men, even though the film, they were telling people, this is not for you if you're a man, right? I mean, they didn't really want to believe that, but they were just trying to clap back at the haters, So yeah, they were alienating their core audiences, and there were some studio and exec responses that amplified this division, and it just went exactly where I thought it was going to go. So what we ended up with is, I think it made about $38 million domestic and 68-ish worldwide. That is abysmal. That is well below their expectations by like more than $50 million. And the second weekend, it dropped steep by 74%. So you have a $170 million movie, and then you add on top of that the marketing, which is often like the same amount or close to it. I think in this case, the marketing for this film was about $120 million. So you have $290 million movie that made about $80 million, maybe. Like it might, like by the time this is, it's had its run, and it's already going to be available for streaming at the end of the month. It's going to be available to stream, I think, on Amazon and probably, I believe Max or HBO. I don't know if they still, Warner Brothers, the one that Warner Brothers owns, whichever one that is. Of course, the audience scores are not great. So even though you still had some people that went and saw it, they went and saw it and then realized it did actually suck. Okay, it did actually suck. None of this is surprising. Of course, feminists online are really mad that the movie didn't do well, and they're basically blaming the men for not going out and watching it. But men did go out and watch it. In fact, they were the majority of people who went and watched it, of the people who did go. And they also called for women to support these kinds of projects. They were like, women, you should go out there, you should watch these movies, if anything, just to upset the manosphere, which is basically a word that means a man online that has an opinion. That's all it is. It's not, you don't have to be in a club or anything. If you have an opinion and you're a man, welcome to the manosphere. Just saying. But, okay. So now I want to talk about what this contrasts with. So we're going to talk about Citizen Vigilante. Citizen Vigilante has a very similar plot, which is really interesting. Citizen Vigilante, for those of you guys who don't know, it was a film by Uwe Boll. He's very well known for making super low budget movies that are kind of exploitation films. They're not generally very good. He often adapts video games like House of the Dead. I think he did Postal and a couple of others, a few others, but he's got a long history of doing these. I watched one of his movies called, I think it's called In the Name of the King, with Jason Statham. It was terrible. It was terrible, but we laughed like from start to finish. So it's like a good kind of terrible, you know. Some people are big fans of his. I don't get it. I think he's generally a bad filmmaker. But that being said, he does have, like, I don't know. I kind of like his personality because he doesn't like the elitism of Hollywood, and maybe that's why he's sort of like the Ed Wood of our time. But he made a film called Citizen Vigilante, which is a kind of like a vigilante thriller in the same vein as, let's say, Death Wish, right? A lot of people compare it to Death Wish. Now, Death Wish is a good movie, so I'm not saying it's on the same level in terms of quality, but it's more about what the conversation that Citizen Vigilante is trying to have is where it's similar to Death Wish, because Death Wish was coming out at a time where you had like big crime waves going on in a lot of the major cities like New York, and people were talking about self-defense and guns, and that was a big conversation that was going on. And so you had, and of course, in New York, I think that there's pretty strict gun laws now. I don't know if they were always that way, probably. But you have like Charles Bronson's character, Kimball, and he's basically like an architect, and he gets a gun because his wife and daughter get like raped and murdered by a random gang, and he basically goes on a crusade, a spree to like clean up the streets because, the politicians won't do anything. The police are incompetent, or they're unable to solve these problems, or their hands are tied, or whatever. So he's like, I'm going to do this myself. And what Death Wish did was it started a conversation about crime. It started a conversation about vigilantism, and I think it's a good enough movie for a number of reasons, and that's just a couple of them. But that's the thing about stories that people forget, is that stories are ultimately arguments. They are ultimately, you're always making a case for something when you tell a story, right? You're not just relaying information or making something up. You're trying to make us say something. And every good story says something. It says something about good and evil. It says something about friendship. It says something about revenge, whatever it is, right? Depending on the film. So this movie, starring Armie Hammer, who was recently, or not recently, but formerly canceled and brought back into the fold by Uwe Boll, which is another reason why I admire Uwe for this, because he was able to look past these like allegations that Armie Hammer suffered and basically said, look, this guy should get work. And he definitely has the chops to be like, a good actor, but he just got caught up in a controversy. But so he made the movie, and they made it on, I don't know, like, I think it was like $100 and something thousand, like a very, very small budget. I will clarify, I'll look it up after this recording, and I'll put up the real amount. So the actual budget for Citizen Vigilante was $2 million. Still really, really small considering how much it made. but it had a very strong video on demand response. It wasn't released in a lot of theaters, but it's already made more than $67 million. It's one of the top downloads or viewed new films on Amazon. It topped the charts because of the social media buzz and the controversy, and it has an appeal. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with the fact that it's talking about sex trafficking, but in a way that is more like grounded and realistic and relatable, because it's about what's like something that's actually happening, you know, in Europe. And not just Europeans, but Americans and all kinds of people are watching this stuff because they strongly believe that this is a really important conversation to have, which is why I said films are arguments, stories are arguments, really. And he was making he was making the case, or at least showing people that, this is the stuff the reason why your life sucks right now, or why things are so bad in Europe, right? It's because of incompatible cultures, and it's about corrupt people in political positions. It's about activist judges, and, a criminal justice system that does not persecute the actual, they don't protect their citizens. And so the main character of this story does the same thing that Charles Bronson did, takes the law into his own hands and starts dealing with this problem. And the movie resonated with people enough that it made a shit ton of money. Now, it's not as much as Supergirl, but it didn't have the same release, and it certainly did not have the same budget. So that makes it a success. Then you have these little YouTubers that have made movies that have also killed it. Obsession, which is a little indie horror film, it was made on a $750,000 budget, $750,000, but made over $400 million worldwide. It's a record holder for a low-budget success story. The Backrooms made a little bit more money, $10 million, had a humongous opening, $81 million, and became A24's biggest domestic hit. So it's A24 is the studio that put it out. And so while Supergirl struggled, it was a big giant. It's essentially like what's going on in gaming. You have Supergirl, which is a big AAA release, and it's getting killed by these little indie projects, probably put together by people who used to work in the industry, like some of them, anyways, right? So now that that's come out and it's flopped, the media, like the New York Times, are now basically attributing the flop to resurgent misogyny and male fan base backlash rather than the film quality, the marketing, or the execution, which all of those things are true. And again, it was mostly men that watched it. So men cannot be to blame for this, but that won't stop them from doing it. Now, the cast, the crew, and the studio, they have doubled down defending Millie Alcock. Again, I don't think she was the reason for it, but this is what they do, is they use these women as shields to shield them from the criticism of the project itself. I think Millie Alcock's probably a fine actress. I know she was on Game of Thrones or something. I'm sure that she could be completely competent, but it doesn't matter because they have to try to cope with the fact that they made a bad movie. So is this going to impact the DCU? I think the DCU is it never really got off the ground. It didn't have what Marvel had. And I remember calling this out back when the MCU was getting rolling, talking after the first Avengers movie came out. And I was like, if DC's going to get on this, they got to get on it right away. And I remember DC originally announced that they were just going to open with a Justice League movie and then do the individual movies. I think that's what their plan was initially. I said, oh, that's terrible. That's a bad idea. I wouldn't build a universe, a cinematic universe, until I knew that I had like the appropriate working parts. Because the original plan for Marvel was only to make Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, and Hulk, and an Avengers movie, and that was going to be the end of it. Like that was what their big risk was. That was their Hail Mary play, because Marvel was losing money, you know, as a comic book publisher for a while, because again they got infiltrated by woke writers, and so their comics weren't selling, and so they were like, we got to save the brand, and this was like their final play, and it obviously paid off. But then they kept carrying it forward, and I'm not saying it was all bad because of it, but it did start to like take on a life of its own, and I think that the unraveling of that was inevitable, because these things are, nothing lasts forever. So I think it's just like one of those things, right? It's kind of inevitable. Anyway, so Supergirl's bomb is just indicative of where the state of Hollywood is now, where the state of indie film is at now, and I don't think Hollywood can fix this problem. I don't think that they can, because they have to fundamentally change the culture of Hollywood. They have to get away from identity politics. They have to get away from trashing middle America. They have to get away from attacking men in particular. They have to drop that stuff, and I don't think they can. I think that they're too far gone, and they can't course correct on this stuff. And I hope that what we get instead is just more indie projects that essentially will, give us what we want in terms of content. And I'm optimistic that that will happen, because these things, there's always someone who's willing to do the work and like rise up. So with all that said, I want to give a shout out to Uwe Boll and Citizen Vigilante. It's one of those things, you don't know where your support is going to come from. You don't know who's going to be on your side. It could come from a very unexpected place, and I think in Uwe Boll's case, it definitely is unexpected. So shout out to Uwe Boll for your success. Shout out to the people behind the Backrooms and Obsession. You guys did well. I hope that we see more stuff like that. Shout out to Markiplier for starting this trend, or at least being like the pioneer in this. And I guess we'll have to see where things go from here. But DCEU is going to keep plugging forward. They're going to keep making excuses. But I think that all of this stuff it's all running on fumes. They're basically doomed. And that's basically the end of that. So anyway, let me know what you guys think about this one in the comments. If you like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave me a comment, let me know what you guys think about what I talked about here. Did you see Supergirl? What did you think about it? Did you watch Citizen Vigilante? I understand you can watch the whole thing for free on X right now. Backrooms, whatever, Obsession, let me know. And thanks so much for coming on this video, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Long live Vivian.
I just wanted to play video games.